The 2025 special session of the Nevada Legislature ended Wednesday night. It was a wild 7-day roller coaster into obscure procedural rules, unlikely alliances, and sure, maybe some new laws. But more than that, distinct winners and losers as we head into election year 2026. Today on CityCast Las Vegas, we welcome back the Nevada Independent's Capitol Bureau Chief Tabitha Mueller, who had a front row seat into the chaos of it all. It's Monday, November 24th. I'm Dayvid Figler, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. Tabitha, you're still alive after all of that.
Somehow, I feel like after every legislative session or special session, there's this moment where you go, what is my life,
Yeah, I know they were going into late night sessions and went over the weekend. Let me ask you this. When Governor Joe Lombardo made a proclamation that there was going to be a special session, what do you think his expectations were? And then I'm going to ask you what it turned out to be.
I think his expectations were everything that was on that proclamation was just going to go through, that there were all the votes that were there. I mean, historically, when we call a special session, you generally know what's going to happen, right? Like when they called the special session because one of the constitutionally mandated budget bills in the 2023 session did not pass and needed to, right? It was like, this is the one bill you're gaveling in and you're gaveling out. And you are voting for this or I'm keeping you here forever.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of one-issue special sessions. The Raiders Stadium comes to mind.
Oakland
public
A's.
Funding for the Oakland A's Stadium, which is still yet to be built. But this was different. This had a lot of items on the agenda. So how did the reality of Governor Lombardo's expectations work out for him?
I think that this session was sort of a game changer, right? We saw procedural moves we have never seen before. We saw a historic moment where lawmakers called their own special session to add something onto the governor's agenda.
Yeah, kind of in the middle of things, which we called a turducken on this podcast. It was a session stuffed inside another session.
Honestly, a great metaphor.
Okay.
And then there was the other point of this is the most watched bill of this legislative session died very dramatically on the floor of the Senate in the final hours. So we have a lot to talk about, I think.
I want to go through as many of the marquee bills, if you will, that were part of the special session as possible. But just generally speaking, I saw at the very end, the governor thanked everyone for, coming together and doing all this. What kind of BS was that final statement? Because it sounded like he didn't get hardly anything of what he wanted.
I think that statement was the most milquetoast way you could say, well, we got some things done and we finished, right? And I think that it was kind of a bipartisan, well, there are no hard feelings now. So we'll kind of see how that shakes out when it comes to the 2026 election. Governor Joe Lombardo is running for re-election. Senate Majority Leader Nicole Cannizzaro is going to be running for Attorney General. And who knows what Assembly Speaker Steve Yeager is going to be doing, but we are watching that closely.
Yeah, the leadership of the Democrats in both houses in Nevada are leaving for other endeavors, whatever they might be. So this was kind of like a weirdo, lame duck special session with a lot of things on the agenda that the governor set. So let's just get into it. The film tax credit bill. Basically, it was a transferable tax benefit to lure Hollywood studios to Vegas. It was sponsored by the Dems, but it died this spring. Why did Republican Joe Lombardo put it on the agenda? And then how did the resurrected version fare?
So we are still diving into this question, and I have a lot of calls that are going out right now. But my take on this is when something gets added to a special session agenda, generally there's the understanding that there is support for it. My guess is that all the different sides said the votes are there, and let's get this on the agenda and get this thrown up for a vote and pass it as a way to bring thousands of jobs, what proponents said, to the Southern Nevada economy at a time where we're seeing an economic dip. Now, opponents have really pushed back against this legislation, which would have, I'll say, increased the existing film tax credit program of $10 million up to $120 million beginning in 2029 and expanding out for the next 15 years from that. So that's a massive amount of money that we're talking about making available for kind of offsetting taxes. And the transferable nature of it means that it's not just film companies that would use it. The film companies could sell those tax credits to other companies, cough gaming, or,
people whose money we really depend on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so when this proposal went up for a vote, it passed out of the assembly on a 22-20 margin. So very, very narrow. And 2 members of the assembly were actually voting remotely. If it had only been an in-person vote, the legislation wouldn't have passed. Then it made it over to the Senate. And I think we sat around for a couple of days just waiting for it to get a vote. It got a hearing. It passed out of committee. And then when it was put up on the Senate floor in the final hours of the legislative session, it did not receive the constitutionally mandated number of votes that it needed to move forward.
And it just missed by 1 vote.
Yeah, it was 1 vote. I mean, we saw it was the narrowest of margins. And when you were there, it was funny because I was sitting in the middle of the hall between the 2 legislative chambers, and folks came over and they were watching my laptop, watching the vote take place on the screen up in the chamber gallery.
Like a sporting event.
I mean, honestly, the
last game of the World Series, everyone's gathered around whoever has the TV.
Yeah. And you're holding your notes with you, and you think you know what the votes are. And you're like, okay, this is who's voting what. This is who's voting where. Some of the lawmakers gave speeches before they cast their ballot, so you had some idea. And then it didn't pass on the floor.
Now, this was Sandra Hadegi's bill. Is she taking the hit for it not being able to pass, or is there someone else who's going to be held responsible?
I mean, in the whodunit of this bill's death, we're still kind of looking through looking behind the scenes, talking to insiders, talking to lobbyists. But I think that if you look at the assembly, it made it out of the assembly chambers. So I think you need to look at maybe the Senate. You maybe need to look at the governor's office. Obviously, the votes weren't in the Senate, and the question is why. And I think some lawmakers, put it right out there where they said, Senator Melanie Scheibel said, I thought long and hard about this, and ultimately, I can't get there today. And her sort of thought process had to do with the fiscal elements of the
there's
bill.
A lot of discussion of that always, but okay, so he puts it on the agenda. It doesn't make it to his desk. Wah, wah. Let's move on to the thing he really wanted, like you said, was the crime bill, which also didn't pass the first time around. And now there was this toned-down version that was placed on the special session. Tell me about the twists and turns that the final version, which was passed by both houses and is heading to the governor, took. Does he sign it? Does he punt because of what happened? Tell me.
So there was an amendment added by Democrats. And in that amendment, it would prohibit school districts and public schools from allowing law enforcement from accessing school grounds without a lawful order, except in exceptional circumstances. And the language is kind of vague, but when you look into it, you start to realize this is directed at immigration officials. So maybe
Sure.
ICE agents, that type of thing. And this idea came up in the 2025 session. It passed out of the legislature and it was vetoed by Governor Joe Lombardo. So it could be a poison pill to this piece of legislation, or it could be something that they've negotiated with the governor. The only way we're going to know is once it gets signed, right? And there was also a part of this amendment that would have required detention facilities, such as immigration facilities in Nevada, to maintain a running list of the people that they hold. Right now, those lists just don't exist. And so when this kind of came up, it was sort of oh man, is this going to be like a poison pill that Democrats add and have to veto? But close legislative observers also noted there was another piece of legislation that was added that would have just established that corridor court, or the section that talked about
protects the strip.
Protects the strip, exactly.
From anyone who looks like they're a wrongdoer who's been found guilty or accused of the most minor of offenses, trespass or sleeping on the sidewalk or whatever.
And so when that came forward, it was kind of like, oh, that moves forward. The bill moves forward. If he vetoes one, at least, this court gets approved.
He's got his resort corridor court kind of preserved as a backup.
Exactly. And both Democrats and Republicans would support that corridor court, right?
Yeah.
Like that was a bipartisan effort from lawmakers.
All right. So the crime bill is a little bit up in the air, whether or not he's going to sign his own legislation or not because of what the Dems did. I get it. It's wild. That's crazy. But maybe the crazier thing is that, like you mentioned, the Dems called their own session in the middle of the session. They've never done that before. And two bills that got considered I want to talk about because they weren't on the governor's agenda. Let's start quickly with that housing bill. Give me the riches to rags tale of that bill's journey.
So this historic move the legislature did sort of hinges on a part of the Nevada Constitution that says that the governor may call a special session or the legislature may call a special session as long as it has 2/3 of members in both chambers, right? And what you need to understand is that Democrats are 1 seat shy of 2/3 majority in the Assembly and 1 seat shy of 2/3 majority in the Senate. Right. So they needed at least 2 Republicans to get this across, 1 in each chamber. And they got 2 Republicans.
In the guise of a husband and wife, right?
Exactly.
The fiercely independent.
Fiercely independent, very vocal Senator Ira Hansen, a Republican from Sparks, and his wife, Assemblymember Alexis Hansen, who also lives in Sparks and is a Republican. And what they did when they called this is Senator Hansen had been a big proponent of legislation to crack down on corporate housing. It had been brought by Senator Dina Neal, who's from North Las Vegas, for 2 sessions in a row, 2023, 2025. And Hansen had voted for it in 2023. Lombardo subsequently vetoed it when it reached his desk. And in 2025, he got up and made a passionate floor speech where he said, I support this legislation, but the governor's office has asked me to vote against it. So that's what I'm doing. He said it was his biggest regret, one of his biggest regrets of the session. And he brought it back this special session. They said it was critical. It was needed at a time where housing prices are through the roof for families.
And how'd that die?
It passed out of the Senate with a unanimous vote. Republicans, Democrats. The governor's office had, I assume, given its stamp of approval, given that vote, made it over to the Assembly, and it died in the Assembly. Assemblymember Alexis Hansen voted against it. The bill had needed a 2/3 majority, and it didn't move forward.
Was this all some weird theater? Did the Hansens piss off the governor, but now Assembly person Hansen's okay, but Senator Hansen's bad? How's that?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Now, my guess is not as good as yours.
Well, both lawmakers basically just vanished from the floor shortly after. They were not, we tried to chase them down, and they had just snuck out at some point during the chaotic end of that.
Yeah, and I don't think we need to talk about it, but it does look like the Dems snookered everyone by getting their own session on, and they got a voter access bill through, basically, which means it gets to show up again next session and then in front of the voters to allow mail-in ballots because they're under attack now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that was kind of crazy. And Tabitha, we keep coming back to these unprecedented procedural maneuvers. Why do you think so much of that popped up in this special session?
I mean, I think folks were really frustrated with that film tax credit legislation, right? A couple of people that I spoke to referred to it as there was the resistance within the Dem faction of all of this. And their goal, I mean, people felt so strongly about this piece of legislation that it would be terrible, from their words, for our economy or for the state budget, that they were willing to put everything on the line and say, we are going to do everything we can to stop this. And so, I mean, one of the lawmakers who led this sort of, I don't want to call it a coup, because it wasn't a coup. They didn't oust anyone from power.
Well, but it was definitely a disrespect to their leader, Steve Yeager, at least, and it got very public. And
the lawmaker who stood up to challenge and use these procedural moves, I mean, I checked in with her and I was like, where did you get this idea? How did, and his Assembly member, Selena LaRue Hatch, who's a Democrat from Reno. And she's like, I'm a high school teacher. Like, where do you think I got? Like, and she showed me pictures of the procedural rule books and she had highlighted them and added tabs to them. And like, it was she
Score
had
one
thought
for
about
the
this.
citizen legislator.
I know, yeah.
All right.
And so I think that this was really a way for folks to say, we are expressing our dissent. And especially to be called back, I think, in a special session, which means that folks have to leave their homes, they have to leave their jobs, they have to come up to Carson City to have this sort of debate. I think there was real frustration. I think there was also frustration stemming from the end of the 2025 legislative session. There were some votes and some consternation around those votes that I'm sure sort of bled into this as well.
Like you said, there were a bunch of different items that got considered on that big governor's agenda. Of the ones we haven't discussed, any surprises of what did or didn't make it to the governor's desk?
I mean, I think that the film tax credit bill was a surprise. Anything that gets put on the legislative agenda is generally considered you have the votes to pass it. Because otherwise, safe. Otherwise, why would you call people in?
Did all the other ones that were on the governor's agenda at least make it through?
So all of the other pieces of legislation that made it, besides that film tax credit bill, were on the governor's agenda. Now, there were some measures that we talked about that failed. The corporate housing crackdown bill,
right.
And then the separate corridor court bill didn't pass either.
Any chance any of them will get vetoed?
So I think that generally what was on that proclamation is going to move forward. Now, there were some bills that were introduced that could raise some question marks, right? There was a bill to sort of address workplace lung diseases for certain firefighters.
That sounds non-controversial.
Well, but it wasn't specified on the proclamation, right?
Oh.
And there's an argument to be made legally that like it was on the proclamation because of the criminal justice and the public safety, and this is part of that. So we're going to kind of have to wait and see if the governor views that as germane to the topic. And Windsor Park was also on that, and a couple other pieces. So
that's the sinking community that needs help to relocate in North Las Vegas?
Absolutely. And I think that the governor put that on the proclamation, which indicates that it'll get a signature, but maybe there's something weird in that piece of legislation or in another bill, right? So we're going to kind of have to wait to see as his team pours over those pieces of legislation to make sure the governor is good with every provision. But I do think the workplace lung disease measure is kind of interesting because that wasn't technically on the proclamation and could be sort of rife for a question mark.
Well, that's a funny technicality. And what chutzpah the governor would show saying, oh, that was outside the scope when maybe the whole scope was outside the constitutional allowance. But that's another question for another day, why no one challenged that, because it seemed like everybody was getting something. So let's get to who got what. Who are the winners and losers of this session people-wise? I mean, what electeds came out looking good, maybe bad, maybe even ugly as we head into the 2026 election cycle?
I mean, I think that first off, Senator Dina Neal, who's from North Las Vegas, came out looking really good, at least in terms of the legislation that she got across. She got Windsor Park, which is something that she has advocated for a very, very long time. And she's been tireless in that. I will have to give her credit there. She also, her corporate housing legislation.
Almost made it.
And when I asked her about this, I was like, look, it failed. And she was like, but we still brought it. And we are still going to continue bringing it. And this shows that there's an appetite for that legislation. So I think she views that as a win, even if it maybe didn't make it all the way across the finish line. Another person, I think, is the Senate Majority Leader, Nicole Cannizzaro. The end of the 2025 session left some big sort of question marks because a lot of things died in sort of a chaotic end to that session.
A lot of people were blaming her for being a bad steward of the session. But this session, nobody heard anything from her, really.
The Senate went pretty smoothly. I mean, up until you received the film bill, and then there was some long drawn out conversations in there. But she kept that changeover running.
Sounds like she didn't whip her people, though.
Well, if you look at it, the question mark is how many people was she supposed to whip? How many people is the governor supposed to whip? I mean, we're still kind of digging through those numbers, but she came out looking pretty good. She got the criminal justice legislation that was sort of a big concern for everyone because it didn't pass last time because of some procedural maneuvers and Senator Ira Hansen standing up on the floor in a protest, kind of a filibuster, but not really. So she got that across. She's running for attorney general.
So she wants to look tough on crime, too, even though, again, that bill really is just a Resort Corridor Protection Act and more punishments in very limited areas.
For smash and grab crimes. Yeah, exactly.
Which was kind of a crime anyway. I'm going to just say there was... it just adds on a little extra. That was already a felony. Okay. So losers...
Ooh, losers is tough, right? Because so much of this is going to depend on what happens in the 2026 election cycle, what sort of comes to the surface as we're doing sort of deeper dives into this, right? I think that there could be an argument that Governor Joe Lombardo may not come out looking as good as he could because of maybe some of the amendments to that crime bill, the one we talked about with the immigration stuff. Maybe he comes out looking great. I think it's sort of a time will tell on some of these losers, as you put it.
I mean, there was a kerfuffle with maybe some of the unions were criticizing some of, and look, when unions say we're going to pull our support from you because we don't like how you voted on this particular bill, we know that they have the ability to follow up. I saw that Senator Edgar Flores bailed, and there were some allegations that he might have been, getting some strong arm from lobbyists.
And we saw that there were strong arming techniques pulled, and I think that that's something we're still looking into and hopefully going to kind of take a closer look at and what that meant. But I think that some people are going to get primaried, and I think that we're going to see this play out in the election cycle.
Over the film bill?
Over the film bill. I mean, unions really pushed for it. I mean, we were talking from what proponents were saying, 19,000 union paying jobs. And proponents were saying these were good paying jobs. I mean, high wages for hourly. And so we're going to kind of have to see how the unions react. They have a PAC, the Nevada Jobs Now PAC, and they did fund it with an initial $1 million. And that could come to play in the election cycle.
Interesting. All right. Well, any chance that we're going to see another special session before next 2027? I
hope not. But I mean, the way that our legislature is set up is that if the unexpected happens and we are not able to, something comes up that means we can't function or we didn't prep for it, we didn't have the money set aside for it, we'll have to come into a special session. But hopefully not before 2027. My sleep schedule really would prefer for that not to be the case.
Your former colleague, Jacob Solis, called it the Texification of Nevada with all these potentials on how they handle these special sessions. So, yeah, I'm with you on that one, Tabitha. I want you to get good night rest every night before the next election cycle. Tabitha Mueller, thank you so much for joining us and kind of breaking down the special session with us here on CityCast Las Vegas.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And that's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, go tell a friend. You can also rate our show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. Don't forget, you can support this show and get some great perks by becoming a CityCast Las Vegas neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Till then, stay lucky.